There we go. Hello, and welcome to a new episode of Life Studied with me, Mike Hawthorne, and my good friend Mairin-taj Caya. Uh, we are in the Pennsylvania College of Art and Design in downtown Lancaster, who has graciously allowed us to use the facilities and sponsors the show. So, um, anyway, so we basically just sort of talk art while drawing. And if you're interested in drawing, if you have questions about art and life, we sort of cover all of that. Mairin-taj, how are you?
I'm good. I'm ready to go.
Mairin-taj has got the Britney mic, and I got the corny clip-on mic. Yours is cooler than mine. So everything good?
Yeah.
A good week?
Yeah. Well, it's a week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the weather's kind of crummy. We're sort of the tail end of summer.
Getting ready for the new semester.
That's true. School starts in 2 weeks. We'll be doing anatomy again, which is fun, but also I found out we have a huge class of like 2 years. So we'll be squeezing. I don't know if we're in this room or not, but it'll be tricky.
Yeah.
We talked about having bunk easels so that we can have enough kids to pick up. I'm going to invent that. Don't steal my idea, please.
Patent pending.
Yes. So today, besides drawing, I thought I would. I feel like I'm being rude. Like
No, we're good. Yeah. We have this weird situation,
yes,
so.
yes. And we have this weird super wide angle
Yeah.
camera today we're trying out. But I thought I'd talk about practice. So I saw this meme,
Yeah.
and you've probably seen it out there. It's a person drowning.
I have not seen this.
So you haven't
I don't
seen
know.
it. If you read like books, I'm on the internet and I do the internet stuff. So it's like a image of a person drowning, and then there's they're reaching out for help, and then you'll see a hand like high fiving them,
And then they just
the person
drown.
goes under the water, right? So that's the setup, and then people add different text. And the one I saw that got me thinking was the drowning person is asking an artist like, "How do I get better at art?"
Mm.
And then the hand that is presumably the person who knows a little more about art or is a professional gives the person a high five and says, just practice. And then the person says thanks and like goes under the water and drowns.
Oh.
Which was like a bummer. But it just got me thinking because that's the answer I get.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's always like, how do I get good at X, Y, Z? Often in the comment section of my Instagram, which is like everybody knows is a great place to teach someone how to do a complicated thing like drawing. But I just say some version of, it just takes practice. I'm not special. I just have done this a lot.
Yeah, right.
Which I thought was a fair answer. And I think probably
It comes from your desire to inform others, like, I don't know. It's meant to be comforting,
yeah, I that's exactly right. Like I'm trying to not say like I'm special, therefore I have this
Right.
special skill, and you can't attain it. Blah blah blah. Like
Right.
that, growing up, that was kind of the thing, right? Everybody bragged if they were good at something, everybody showed off, and I'm trying to do the opposite of that.
Mm.
Never occurred to me that might be harmful in some way.
Mm. Yeah.
So I guess the question is practice harmful in some? So let me rewind that. Is the answer not helpful?
Mm.
Is practice in itself harmful in some way, like frustrating or not conducive? I mean, I think there's some pushback to this whole like grind culture nonsense, and is
What
telling.
is? I don't know what that
So
is.
it's the idea of like you just got to hustle and grind and work
okay.
through it
Yeah,
and be
yeah.
macho.
Yeah. No, it's
And-
the grindstone sort of thing.
Right.
Yeah.
And is telling people to practice just a version of that, or is that how it's heard?
Yeah, that's fair.
So I don't know. What do you think?
That is a fair question. I mean, I really depends on the listener and what their mindset is. I mean, I'm always going to
Or their
say
grind set?
the mindset. Yeah, you're going to hear a lot from me on these episodes that I'm always talking about mindset and philosophy. But
Yeah.
so take that for what you will. But I guess it just depends. I can see that being frustrating for someone, especially if they're kind of more starting out or they don't really have a sense of sort of how to gauge for themselves where they're at in their process and how to develop, I can see how that'd be like, well, thanks a bunch, but I
Yeah.
don't really know what to do with that.
Yeah,
It's kind
yeah.
of an abstract thing to say.
Yeah, and like practice what?
Right, exactly.
Like,
How to practice,
right.
what to practice specifically.
Yeah, and I think also there's some pushback to just the idea of laboring at a thing until it comes to you. Not that, and I think there's this sort of perception that like younger generations are just lazy. They don't want to do anything. They just want to get the thing without the effort. And I don't think it's that at all. I think they just are hip to the idea that like a lot of this stuff is a scam, right? Like, hey, you just need to grind, and for $50 a month, I'll teach you how. And the idea of just telling them to practice and not giving direction probably just feels hurtful to them. Also,
or maybe dismissive, like,
yeah,
I get
maybe.
that I have to practice, but I'm trying to get to like exactly how or what.
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know?
and maybe that's it too. And the other thing is, like, so I use a lot of sports metaphors because that's sort of the best way I can think about how I tend to approach things. And I recognize that a lot of people aren't into sports or never played organized sports. So if this stuff is clunky, I apologize. But I think, I was looking up an article and it said, the difference between, I think they were studying batters in baseball and the ones that do well versus the ones that don't. It's like an 18% difference that practice makes.
Okay.
So then you have to question, well, then where does the rest come from?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I don't like that for a lot of reasons because it implies that some people are just better at batting. But the truth is some people are just better at batting. Right? So I think we accept that in sports and in art. That makes me, I hope we don't accept that as much because it makes me uncomfortable. And it also, like, sports is such I just need to hit this ball with this bat and that's the defined practice thing. Whereas with art, it can mean a lot of different things. So I want to avoid any kind of talk that like enters that zone of just some people, this isn't for everyone because I don't agree with that. But maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. What do you think?
Wow, I mean, there's so much there. That's a lot. That's a big concept, like it just makes me think of a lot of things. For example, okay, if we're measuring for sports, hitting the ball and getting a percentage ratio to that, like you can't really apply that to art because there are so many things that you're doing. So how many times do you have to measure one specific task to determine how?
Right.
I don't know, like
right. And with the sports analogy, they'll talk about like, so my kids would play sports and they would talk about so one of my oldest daughter ran track and she was like the fastest kid on the team, but she was like a year younger than everyone else on the team. They had bumped her up. And I know it frustrated a lot of the older kids because they're like, I've been on this team 3 years. This kid is not even, she's supposed to be in, the lower level. And now she's in the top spot for X, Y, and Z. And that's frustrating. And I think there's a certain amount of she's just built for that.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting.
But which I always felt a little bad about. But the thing that I did take away from that I thought was a positive is they would tell her, you're not racing other people, you're racing your last personal record, right?
Yep.
Your last personal best. And I think there's something there for artists, right? Where you just say, this drawing doesn't have to be as good as so-and-so. It just has to be as good or better than my last drawing.
For sure. Right.
Whatever that means, right? Because that, like you said, art is a kind of a lot of different things. So,
yeah, and you have it can be objective in certain ways, but it's also very subjective. Your style or your approach or your method can be so unique, and it also changes for you over time. It doesn't remain fixed either. So if you're measuring something that doesn't remain fixed for yourself against other people's also not remaining fixed things, like how can you measure those? How can you compare those things?
Yeah, and like what is getting better mean in art?
Yeah.
I don't know. What does it mean, you think? What do you think?
Getting better? What does getting better mean?
Yeah, because that's so...
I don't have good one-liners for you, man.
I don't think there's an answer. I mean, personally, I don't think there's an answer, right?
Yeah.
Because for some folks... So when I was in art school, a professor actually told me, she said, like, look, you're already good at drawing. When are you going to get past that and get to the real work? which I thought was odd, but what she meant was like abstract work,
mhm,
conceptual work,
mhm.
where are the ideas behind this stuff.
Yeah, right.
Where to me, getting better meant getting better at
Technically
actually
better.
crafting, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
we were like going at this in two different directions. It was never going to line up.
I think that happens a lot in school.
Yeah.
Students are focusing on the technical excellence, because they see the difference of where they're technically at with their skill
Right.
versus like someone they admire artistically, and they want to get to that technical skill, but maybe they're not paying attention to or aware of maturity of thought.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, for a lot of students, getting better means like my drawings are more realistic, whatever that means. And that's a measurable thing in some ways, right? We can look at
Sure.
the thing and go,
It's not the only thing though.
yeah. But I think it's the simplest answer, and that's why often students gravitate towards it.
Yeah, right.
Because you
right.
can look at it and go, wow, that looks like a photograph. I must be good.
Yeah.
Which is often not the case, right? Because getting a realistic drawing in some ways can be the easiest non-skill-based thing. You break out an opaque projector, trace the photo off, and just sit there for hours rendering the thing. And you're good. It looks super realistic, and maybe you didn't learn much about drawing.
Right, or the intentions or the thoughts behind the concept of the drawing.
Right.
Yeah.
So practice itself, a good thing, a bad thing?
Oh, absolutely a good thing.
Absolutely. Okay.
Yeah, I don't think it would be the only ingredient to. What are we thinking of? Like, is practice meant to be an ingredient for for excellence?
Right.
Like, is that the question?
I was hoping you'd ask, right? Because what is practice? You mentioned before the show, we talked about the whole 10,000 hours thing, which has been debunked. If you're not from, I can't imagine you're not, but if you're not familiar, it's from a Malcolm Gladwell book where he talked about, he uses this like clunky metaphor of the clunky story of the Beatles practicing in some nightclub, and that's why they were the Beatles when they went to record and blah, blah, blah. And the guy that came up with the actual concept was like, no, Malcolm, that's not what I meant. But the idea is that you do something for 10,000 hours, and then you have a certain level of mastery, which is not what the original intention was, and it's not accurate, right? Because you can just mindlessly draw. I think you talked about this in one of our classes where you said, like, are you drawing or are you just moving your arm?
Yeah.
And if you move your arm for 10,000 hours, you might get very efficient.
With a jacked arm.
Yeah. At doing kind of bad drawings.
Right. Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes. Oh, I've definitely talked about that before. We've talked about it too, is like, right, the awareness of what you're doing and why, because you could just get habitual with bad habits.
Yeah.
You know.
And we see it all the time.
All
right?
the time.
Kids that have been in high school and they just got really good at drawing that one thing they like.
Yeah.
And maybe they don't have 10,000 hours, but they have tons of time invested. And
Right.
they get here and they're like frustrated. So
well, that brings into question, like, so what are you putting practice into? How much practice are you putting into it? Because maybe that practice. Oh,
sorry, it's a live show. It happens. It's gonna happen. Sorry.
Maybe that practice is. I'm not sure how I was going to phrase this, but maybe that practice is setting you up for having to dismantle a bad habit that's been in place for so long.
That's awesome.
And it's harder to dismantle a bad habit that you've
Yes.
been doing for a really fucking long time than only for a few weeks or whatever.
Yeah. And not only is it a bad habit, but then you have sunk cost, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm really good at this thing.
Yeah.
We had a guy at my school who was really good at drawing the logo of a sports team. He literally became that guy, and every art project he had incorporated that character from the sports
Oh my
team.
gosh.
And so talking him out of that, it was like, no, but I'm really good if I draw this thing.
Oh. That reminds me of, as a kid in first and second grade, I like trained myself to get really, really good at replicating the way like Simba or Nala from from Disney would be drawn, or like the Little Mermaid. I'd like draw her, or Pocahontas. I'd draw her perfectly to the way she was done. But then you reach a point where you're like, but then all I can do is that.
Yes. And that's probably where growth is. Right?
Yeah.
You hit a point where you're like, I could just stay here practice this and everybody will say how great I am at this thing,
Mm-hmm.
or go beyond it where it's uncomfortable
Yep.
and
Start over,
yeah,
learning something new.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. And so practice
Mm-hmm.
is generally, I'm going to say, I'm going to agree with you that it's good, with the caveat that it should not uh, take the place of the joy of doing the thing. Because I know I would practice even when I was just exhausted, miserable, not having fun.
Mm.
Um,
Mm.
I think I was, and I've mentioned this on previous shows, I was a little hyper competitive, and I'm in an industry where by nature it's very competitive. There's always somebody trying to take your job, and so
Yeah.
I still do. I probably do it when I should just chill and enjoy, or
Mm.
maybe
Step
draw
away.
for fun and not like,
Yeah.
maybe stepping away. It's funny because I didn't even consider it.
I consider that all the time.
Yeah, and it probably would do me some good.
Yeah. Right.
Um,
Right. Because then, speaking of setting up bad habits, in by nature of the type of practice you have, one of those bad habits could be associating like bad emotions with the practice, because you're just like forcing yourself to do something when you're just not there. You know, when you can't
Exactly.
bring yourself in your best way to it.
Exactly, and that's why I want to add the caveat. 'Cause
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
there is times when practice
It's not
is
okay.
toxic
Yeah.
or bad. Maybe toxic is a strong word.
Yeah.
And that comes back to that need, right? That's the feeling of like,
Uh,
I'm saying, hey, practice. I'm not special. This is just time
Yeah.
invested.
yeah.
And the other person might be hearing, that sucks. I practice and I'm just frustrated the entire time. I hate the process. I'm not showing any progress.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're talking two different things.
Yeah.
And it's not that the thing is the wrong advice, it's that the meaning is sort of like me and the professors that I mentioned earlier. We're talking two different things.
Or maybe you're talking about one aspect of the greater equation and you're leaving out the other side.
Right.
Like for instance, on my with certain people that I work with, I will mention, because I'm a big fan. I'm like all about balance in general. So what I often say is like, my advice also is, you have to practice, just put in the time and energy, but that has to be paired with a lot of mindfulness, taking steps away. Like
Yes.
looking at other things, ingesting the world, not just ingesting like some kind of nose to the
Yeah.
grindstone art practice, because
Yeah.
then you're going to also be pretty hollow in your art.
Absolutely.
You
And I
know.
think that was the intention of the original 10,000 hours guy,
Yeah.
was mindful practice or mindful acquisition of skills
Yeah.
through practice.
Yeah. Right.
Where like for me, the practice got to be at times that was almost the point. I just got to do an extra 2 figure drawings on top of my regular workload, and then eventually I'll get better.
Uh-huh.
As opposed to like
Oh.
maybe half an unfinished drawing, but I picked up a skill
Mm.
because I slowed down and I didn't just like try to get reps in.
Yeah. Right. Right.
So yeah, I think that's the word. I think mindfulness
Mm.
with your practice is the key, not just like
Mm.
suffering through figure drawing, hating it,
Right.
and doing it over and over and hoping something gets better and it doesn't, and then
Yeah.
you kind of quit.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because frustrating yourself and quitting,
Mm.
then there's no point to any of it.
Yeah.
It's better if you just say, I'm going to give myself as much time as I need.
Mm-hmm.
Practice in a mindful way. Maybe that means I don't draw every day, or I draw every couple of days, or every week, or every month.
Yeah. Integrate healthy habits,
Yeah.
because you're not just a hand machine.
Yeah.
You're
yeah.
also a human being, and like everything that goes in is going to come out in your artwork.
Yeah.
I was thinking about that recently, actually. Like, this concept of what you feed your brain is going to filter into the work you make. And so like ideas can be like junk food as well.
This is true.
And then you can create junky art.
Which some people love junk food art. That's. I mean, but you're right. I think.
But we still need breaks from junk food. We still need to like. Maybe
Absolutely.
this is convoluted, but that's
No.
just
I
how
think that I get it. I think I have often, like on a few occasions where I give myself a break and just gone to like a museum.
Yeah.
And I take something new in, and I come home and go like, oh wait, I feel better about drawing today than I did yesterday before I did this day. I went to I had a signing event in like Delaware and then afterwards we spent the night, and then afterwards we went to the Brandywine.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah,
I
and I
love that
hadn't been
place.
there for years and years and years. I'm just looking at some of these paintings, and I'm like, oh, that's right. Like, some of these are kind of shitty.
Uh-huh.
So it also tweaks your hero worship if you take in the art
Yes.
versus all the sort of polished junk stuff that we see online.
Yes.
It was great to see, the Andrew Wyeth, like the pencil drawings,
Yeah.
the like scribbly stuff, and just the like him just working on ideas. I don't know,
Oh,
it did something.
that's great. I mean, we talk a lot about how process, or we like to see the process of the art
Yeah.
or artwork in process because it lets us into the reality or the humanity of an artist.
Right.
Maybe that's a great way to kind of redefine process, practice, like allow for there to be error, for there to be flaws,
Right.
for there to be breathing room.
Exactly.
You know,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
humanity in your art. You're not going to be a machine, or you shouldn't be, at
No.
least in my opinion. And you,
Yeah, I mean, and seeing these other people's, let's call that practice too, because often
Yeah.
their pencil drawings were just practice runs at a painting or
Yeah.
abandoned paintings. Sometimes, obviously, they maybe never even bothered to go to the next step.
Yeah.
So seeing other people's practice just helped. I don't know. It just gave me a little bit of like a reset,
Yep.
and
For sure.
allowed me to go like, oh, that's right. Why am I being so obsessive about this stuff? And I'll get back there again and become obsessive and weird, and then have to slow down and take a break. And it's hard for me because I'm so obsessed with the sort of getting in reps, and so I think bringing this full circle, it's like a slippery slope. It's easy to fall back into that. If practice is negative for you, it's easy to fall back into that. And I think that's where your advice would come in. Like, just maybe stop, take a
Step
second,
away.
yeah,
Rethink or check in.
touch a tree.
Yeah, touch a tree. Yeah, get some fresh air, get some sun,
real.
get some vitamin D.
Yeah.
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 Or look at some other art that's maybe different from what you're obsessing over. Maybe that's it too.
Amen.
Have we kind of answered that,
I
or
think
is that
so.
clear? I hope you
I think
guys
so.
got something out of that. There's a lot of questions.
There is a lot there, but I think that's good for this, and maybe we should draw.
Yeah.
Bit.
Yeah, we can always pick that stuff up another time.
Yeah. All right. Awesome. So I'm going to step aside here. Did you want me to close that blind, by the way? I think you had it open last
No,
time.
yeah, that's fine. Let me check my parking ticket.
Yeah. So I should probably show this on camera. I'm sharpening pencils. So I'm using a knife, which is the snotty art school way of sharpening a pencil. But it also allows for some variance in how much lead you expose. You can also, we would do like chisel tips sometimes if the pencil lead was thicker. So yeah, you want to look like you know what you're doing. Use a knife to sharpen your pencils. Oh boy, the mic. I totally forgot. I have a. Does that work for you? Okay. Sorry, we hit a technical snag here, so Mairin-taj is setting up. Yes, that's it. True. Yeah. Or I think honestly, one of those arm sleeves like that runners will use for their phones. Yeah, I could pick one up. Would that work? I think. Yeah. Okay. So if you're new to the show, the idea is that I will draw. We'll continue talking. So we normally start with some warm-ups, usually like a minute or two, depending on how we're feeling. And then as you warm up, the process is to like slowly add more time to your drawings. So what do you want to do? All right, we'll do two. So, Mairin-taj, at some point, I'm gonna get set up enough to also have like a mic really close to the paper, and we can start like an ASMR channel of the pencil, uh, like actually on the paper. Because I don't know about you, I used to always love that. Yes. Yeah, I normally I'm listening to stuff while I'm working, but every so often I have to like take a like kind of an auditory break, and it's usually with just listening to the pencil and the paper and just yeah, it can be a little relaxing. Yeah, 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 and you're in the moment, right? You're not like lost in thought listening to a podcast or something. Um, sure, sure, please. Was that a minute? That feels like that was probably a minute. Did you? Oh, my bad. I was thinking either I'm in the zone or that didn't go off. All right. Okay. Do you listen to a lot of stuff when you're drawing? Right. 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 Yes. Oh, okay. That makes perfect sense. Yes. Yes. Yeah, it's okay. Yeah. Yeah, I was gonna say I know a lot of guys that listen to movie soundtracks. Right. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know why I've never gotten into it. I need stuff. So I may have talked to you about this in the past. I need stuff depending on the task. Like so, if I'm doing layouts for something, I need something with no words in it. If I'm doing kind of tedious drafting or complicated drafting stuff, I need something that takes me out of the place. So I end up listening to like podcasters or something like that. Um, it really depends. Like I don't know why. I wish I had a more like, I wish I could say, okay, if I listen to this Gregorian chant, for instance, like I know I'll be able to focus because it seems like it turns on me. Like I'll be really focused listening to a particular thing, and then all of a sudden it doesn't work. It just it's as if there's a light switch on it. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes perfect sense. Yeah. Oh no. Yeah. what we got to do is grow your Patreon so you can get a studio and get out of there. So yeah, if you're listening to this, you should join her Patreon. Link in the show description. You can set goals like that. You know, if I get to this point in my Patreon, I'll rent a studio space where I can do X, Y, and Z and share it on the channel kind of thing. Um, yeah, it feels counterintuitive to me. Like I follow a person on um, Ko-fi or Coffee. I'm not sure how you pronounce it. It's like it's a little like Patreon, but it's like per donation. Like you basically buy them a coffee, and that person will say like, okay, I'm saving up. My next goal is this much money, so I can buy a new. This person paints digitally. She's like, I want to buy a new system to paint X, Y, and Z. And so it's like a fundraiser. You know what I mean? And yeah, it for me feels weird, but it doesn't feel weird for other art. Like if I'm following an artist, for them to do that. So we have to get past that sort of blip of asking for something. Yeah. I'm at the point where I wonder if just space in general is not the thing. Like, recording the show has made it very clear. Like, we're very grateful for the space that PCAD provides. But if I didn't have this, I don't know that I'd be recording a show or doing live figure drawing with you. So yeah, that's. I think that feels like a fair thing to ask if you need a studio space. I do, yeah. And I've gotten used to of having kids in the house. I have purposely never closed my door because I never wanted. I know everybody. I know. I know. I get that a lot from friends. I always wanted to be available. Like I never wanted them to feel like they're competing with work. Yeah. So I just never closed the door. And in fact, like now, my current studio, I can't close the door. Like I have a bookshelf in front of it. So my wife's like, why don't we move this stupid bookshelf of books you're never gonna read, um, so you don't hear when the kids are arguing or something. And it's a weird. I have all these goofy little rules about the studio, and that's one of them that I won't change. Yeah, I like that they always felt like they could just wander in and go like, hey, what are you working on? What are you doing? I want to show you this cool thing. I always got to be involved in their day-to-day lives. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, we should make that clear. You're not like, shut up. Yeah. No, no. So this is your stepdaughter. Yes. And it's not a child either. It's a teenager. So it's not like before anybody jumps on the comment section going, oh my God, Mairin-taj ignores your kid. It's not. This isn't the Great Gatsby, where the little toddler wanders in and they go, oh look how cute this kid is, and then shoos her away. This is a teenager that. Yeah. Yes. Right. Right. And that makes perfect sense. I think I just spooked myself. Like I would hear stories of like, I remember seeing an interview with like Ernest Hemingway's children, and he'd say like how even though he had work hours and his writing studio was separate from where they, their spaces. Um, he'd like hang out the window and scream at them if they were playing in the yard because the studio overlooked the yard. And like, can't you see I'm writing? And just like freaking out on them, even though they're just doing normal kid shit. Um, and so I just wanted to be careful that I was never that guy. You know, like that's their memory of him. Like, oh yeah, Dad used to yell at us every time we were children, and then he shot himself. That was great. So yes, that's yeah, yeah, yeah. Right. You don't want to be goofing around and they show up and yeah. Yeah. Like, whoops, I was reading a book of poetry for 6 hours straight. Yeah, that's true. Because you don't have a boss, right? So if you're not working, you're just hurting your productivity, and there's not someone going, "Hey, you're fired. Why don't you produce X, Y, and Z?" Yeah, yeah, right, right. Anytime there's a coffee break, anytime there's a lunch break, snack break, whatever. Yeah, it's tough. I mean, there's something to be said for sort of the so I'm a big believer in decision fatigue and the idea that like the more decisions I can take off my plate, the less likely I spend spinning my wheels thinking about what I need to do. And like having a boss, having someone could be like, "Hey, you're fired because you were drinking coffee for 4 hours." Um, that's a big motivator. As much as it sucks, so with me, there's a lot of like setting little rules. I can't move until this entire podcast is played, or I have a timer thing, like a little Pomodoro like egg timer thing. I'll use it when I know I'm really struggling, and I'll say, I'll set that, and that'll be like half an hour, 5 minute breaks. And timing the breaks is really the magic, right? Because for me, if I time the breaks more than the work periods, because we will work. I work solid for an hour, and then I need a coffee, and then take a 2 hour break by mistake. Right, right. So timing the breaks has been the magic for me. Do you want to do a little longer? Yeah, yeah. And it sticks with the theme of the practice thing, right? So like, I have caught myself doing two things. One, using practice as an excuse to not do the actual work I need to do for that day. Um, but with more work, right? And it feels like, but I'm working. What's the big deal? But if you have a specific thing, project or a deadline or whatever, um, if it's not moving that forward, then it's not really work. Um, but the other thing is, we're talking about setting an allotted amount of time to do a thing. And so if you're, a stay-at-home mom and you got a kid running around the house driving you nuts, but you really want to draw, you almost have to steal time wherever you can, and that's easier said than done. But I was a stay-at-home dad in some ways, like working from home and having this open door. There were a lot of times when I was, doing layouts while I'm out in the yard and the kids are playing in the sandbox or something. Or the kids are taking a nap, I can go do X, Y, and Z. I mean, I always had my wife, so it wasn't like it was just me. But um, I think setting a sort of a clock for yourself, like, okay, I got 5 minutes. I'm going to go do some gesture drawings. I mean, if you're, right now, this is going to be a 5 minute drawing. Um, it's it's not a ton of time, but it moves the needle a little bit. You know? Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. God, especially with when you're working from home, you have everything else that's not art related that you have to do. Like, oh man, I gotta, like, even right now, this is part of my work, but I'm also on deadline with my normal job, right? So I've set aside an amount of time to do the podcast. But if I'm not careful, I could be like, I'm going to spend more time doing podcasts, and then I can derail my actual work. So you have to be a little disciplined about the time involved with everything. Oh yeah, no, no, yeah, but it's true. I mean, yeah, yeah. There's this funny TikToker guy, and he does like I don't know if he's actually I don't know if he's practicing any particular religion, but he has like he's sort of mimicking the vibe of like some like spiritual leader type of talking. Like you'll see like there's an Indian gentleman who lectures as like a spiritual leader and gives advice. And there's a certain vibe with that, right? They're always like trying to create a certain mood. This guy does that, but he's funny. He does like funny life advice. And he has one about work-life balance. He's like, work-life balance is bullshit. Like, uh, you should not be balancing those. It should not be balanced at all. Work should not. You should not be living as much as you work. And he's being funny, and yeah, but he's 100. I mean, the guy gives the best advice, with this kind of jokey account. And I think about that all the time because we're talking a lot about work, and it's easy for me to forget that, like, well, yeah, you right? Yeah, you good? Okay. If you need to bail on a pose, don't feel bad about it. Okay. Nah, I'll figure it out. I mean, it probably will make me sad, but I'll figure it out. No, my God, no. Something tells me Van Gogh was not let me not say that. There might be Van Gogh fans out there. I always think of this. I remember there was like a news thing about, we've all seen those things where they'll cut into like a morning show and say, here's the oldest person in the world right now. And there was one with like this old French lady, and she was around when Van Gogh was alive. And it was just like that. It was so surreal because we tend to think of everything as like it's in my art history book, so it must be from 100,000 years ago. And Yeah, and so she here's a person who like lived in the time of Van Gogh, and he asked her like, do you have any memories about him? He's like, yeah, he used to just stand on street corners and scream at people or something. And I forget how she worded it, but it was basically like, they asked him like, what he was like, and he's like, yeah, he was just an asshole. He was kind of a jerk. So I think of her often every time Van Gogh comes up, and of course you hear a lot of that as artists. Everybody talks about the "you're gonna cut your ear off" thing, and I'm just like, or maybe not. Maybe he was just he had other things going on. Yeah, yeah, right. Yeah, yeah. I mean, this guy from maybe the story's changed since I was in art history classes, but the idea was always that the way he was presented to us was that he was very driven, and he came to painting late, and so he was really like obsessed with getting better faster and blah blah blah. Yeah. Yep. Right. Yeah. I mean, the comparison thing is especially bad with artists, and I tell students all the time. And this is not. It's probably a cliche by now, but don't compare your inside to everybody else's outside, right? Like that person probably looks at some other person's artwork and says, "Oh my God, I suck too," just like you're saying to yourself. Um, and it's unhealthy as hell, man. And comparison is probably the worst. Outside of just quitting altogether, it's probably the worst thing you can do for your work. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And you'll hear artists talk about it like, well, it's it's it, it drove me to get better. I'm trying to be as good as so and so. Or you'll hear about like legendary competitions. Like uh, Vinci was always competing with Michelangelo, and I'm like, no, or they just were miserable, and they would have been fine without comparing. So I don't know. I don't see much good coming from it, frankly. Yes, it is. Yeah, right. Yeah, because we got that. I don't know about you, but I got that in school. We had a painting professor who made us watch um, Heart of Darkness. So it was a documentary about the making of Apocalypse Now, and just showing Francis Ford Coppola being miserable all the time. And they showed it to us as like the lesson was that's how great art's made, being super miserable about something. Yeah, and I remember thinking like, how about no? That looks like it sucks. You know what I mean? Like the guys, yeah, that's not fun at all. And I think I was kind of a goofy kid, and it drove them nuts because of that. Like, plus I wanted to draw comic books, so it was hard for me to take anything they were saying seriously. Yeah, Yeah, exactly, dude. Like, yeah, right. Plus, I kind of feel like, you don't have to go looking for suffering. Like, it will find you. Yeah, man. Like, chill out, my dude. It's not making you better. I really was taken aback. I had a hard time in the painting program because I just felt like I was never the right audience for the stuff they were selling. And I want to be careful not to be like worded like I'm blaming them because I did. I blamed my professors for a long time for not getting the message. I see now that it worked for some folks, so who am I to judge? But it was not for me. I mean, I was also like, I would like move all we had this really big painting studio, and I would go in and move all the easels so we could play handball in the studio during the winter. Which, yeah, it drove like they drove them nuts. I remember like them later complaining that someone moved all the easels and blah blah blah. Yeah, yeah. I think it's a macho thing in the art world, right? This whole like, I wear overalls. I'm a working man, even though I went to you know Ivy League schools, and I only sculpt these paintings for women. And you would hear this kind of real sexist, goofy stuff. Um, I remember they would say, some professor said about Michelangelo, how, oh, he hated painting because he considered it feminine, and you could tell from his work and his color palette that he was only a true sculptor. Right? Sculpting became like the macho thing to do, and and then I loved it when I forget some I want to say it was like a Japanese company bought the rights to the Sistine Chapel and had it cleaned. Now, if I'm getting this wrong, people can yell at me in the comments. But they had it cleaned, and surprise, surprise, the colors were super bright and vivid. So all that shit they've been telling us about, look, you can tell he made all the colors muted, was all horseshit. It was them, yeah, to like impose their nonsense onto this like hundreds-year-old artist, and so yeah, I wanted to be a goofy kid and play and paint and draw and have fun, and I did have some miserable times. Like I did have a point early on, like in high school, um, and then I went to this governor's school thing where I was like just struggling with art, and I would just lash out, and I would like throw my sketchbook across the studio or whatever. And I had this one professor early on, and she says, she like I got pissed off with some drawing, and I think I like whatever pounded my board and walked off or something. And she, without batting an eyelash, she says something like, and I'm going to butcher this quote, so you can always tell an artist by how they treat their tools, or something like that. And I felt so small. I felt like an idiot. And so from then on, I was just like, I'm just being immature. I just need to like chill out and do the work. And I'm grateful for that because once I got to college, I wasn't in that zone. I was just like a goof. Yeah. I got back to what I was as a kid, just goofy and wanting to have fun. I think I just put pressure on myself in high school. I had to be really good to get into art school, whatever that meant. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Let's see. You want to do one more and call it a day? Okay, we'll do that. Okay. Yeah. And I'm sorry if we cut you off in mid thought there. Okay, good. Poor Alex is here. I feel bad. Alex, thank you for setting up everything. Alex is our tech genius, and she's been uh, patiently sitting here, and I feel terrible. Monitoring it. You think? Yeah. I considered it with because I have a different podcast and we have it's mostly video, but it doesn't need to be. And we considered doing that just audio. So I don't know. Yeah, we could, or just the intro section without the drawing, I guess. Uh-oh. All right. Okay. I will. Nothing. I'll do another two. I posted this drawing. I forget where it was. Maybe Facebook or Instagram. And this guy commented. He says, "Oh, I see you started with the butt." And yeah, yeah. And and this was a person that like actually went to art school and he's being funny, I guess. But it reminded me that like I don't make it clear that we're trained to start from the middle to figure it out. You're less likely to run off the page. Um, you approach it in a less you'll see students start with the head, face, draw it too big, commit to it, and then nothing else can match because the head's too big for the entire figure. Um, and so I will often be starting at the middle of the figure, and if you don't explain it, I guess you might look like you're drawing butts, which is yeah, which is frustrating. And this guy in particular, I was like, come on, man, dude, you went to high school, so I don't know. Yeah, right, right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yep. Right. And if you think about it, the idea of building an entire figure drawing from the eyes down, like it's craziness. It's going to drive you nuts. Your drawings are never going to make any sense. Um, so it just makes sense to start from the middle and build out. Because it's the number one thing that goes wrong in figure drawing classes is like, yeah, I ran out of space. I can't draw the feet, or I can't draw the top of the head. And then either they run it off the page, which is what I prefer they do, or they squish the figure. So you have this like big upper body and tiny little legs. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Yep. Yes. That's exactly it. Right. Goes back to our discussion about practice. Look, I'm good at this one thing. My favorite. I'll end the show, and this is a funny story. My favorite solution was we're in anatomy, and maybe you'll remember this. And a kid, she drew off the page, so she like taped a piece of paper to the bottom of her sketchbook to finish the legs. I'm like, awesome. So, anyway, thank you for joining us for another episode of Life Studied, filmed here at PCAD, Pennsylvania College of Art and Design, in downtown Lancaster, Pennsylvania. I want to thank my good friend Mairin-taj Caya, artist and figure model. I will post the links in the comment section, but you want to direct anybody towards your stuff? Yeah, and your Patreon is, it's all linked on there. Okay. And I'm Mike Hawthorne. You can find me everywhere just about. And thanks for joining the show. And thanks to patrons who are supporting this thing, letting this thing
Yes.
happen. So
Thank you guys. So it's so great to see you participating in these episodes with us.
awesome. All right. Thank you. Have a good one.
Was that longer than normal?
I don't know.